name is Tiara. I'll be doing my final project on chapter 13, which is about love. And this is a few objectives in this chapter, and we'll discuss them as we move along. 13.1, what is the history of the term Eros? What are examples of its meaning? First and foremost, Eros is the god of passion. And here it is there. And before we move on, the Greeks made this distinction that Eros or love as physical loves. So this is a timeline of lust. So lust in the classical myth, this is a picture of Gaius Patronus. He was a Roman poet who basically warned people about lust. And, a famous line from his poem is, "Let us not rush blindly unto it like lustful beasts that only know how to do it." Next, we have the Middle Eastern culture. This is a story, or this is a collection of stories. It's called 1001 Nights. It's a collection of 400 tales from India, Persia, and Arabia. And basically, in 1880, Sir Richard Burton, he translated these stories into English. And mainly, one of the main stories, you have the main character where you have this man who's you have a wife married to a man who only sees women as sexual pleasures and playthings and nothing else. And after he would marry his woman, he will basically, execute him. And she found a way to avoid his death, and eventually he began to look at women as human beings. Medieval lust, this is a picture of Geoffrey Chaucer. He's a secular. He created really a lot of lusty stories and characters that shock, church authorities. And in this time period, Goliards were introduced as well. And Goliards were basically rebellious students, mainly young men, training in priesthood. But they were encouraging people to, live your life young, wild, and free before, getting invested into these holy orders. Shakespeare is an example of this is Romeo and Juliet. I think we are familiar with Romeo and Juliet and their lust for one another. Adultery. This is a scene this is Don Giovanni, and this is from Mozart's opera, and he's basically the biggest seducer of all time. What is the history of agape? What are some examples? Agape is basically platonic love, and platonic love is basically a relationship, without physical relations. The definition of agape is a spiritual and intellectual relationship that is more important than a physical one. Here I created the evolution of agape and examples. So we'll start from platonic idea and work our way on how it, the evolution of it into the platonic love we consider. So what was Plato's idea of love? Plato's idea of love was basically that love can be a physical union, but the pleasures of that body can never be the highest possible good. And according to Plato, there was a such thing as good love and bad love. Good love is when an expression of a need to be in contact with someone, when an expression for a need for contact with someone other than self. Love is bad when physical attraction basically leads to obsession. An example of this is The New End by Ben Simmons. You can refer to it in your book and read up on it. Platonic love reconsidered. This is basically a period where people began to disagree with Plato's idea of love. Plato's idea of love was basically fairy tale-like and more like perfect-like. If you was to ask yourself, what would my ideal person be? I doubt that they have imperfections. And during this stage, these people basically said, listen, love is not perfect. And when you strive to have a perfect relationship, it ends bad. An example of this is The Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne. In the story, you have a man that loves everything about his wife but her birthmark. And he's so disgusted by her birthmark that he tries an experiment to remove it. And in the end, when he does remove it, the wife dies. And this is just a way of showing you that love is not perfect. Individuals are not perfect. And you cannot have a relationship trying to be perfect. It just won't end good in the end. 13.3, what is meant by love in the context of family and friendship? So we'll start from family togetherness and work our way down to Confucius and family. So when we look at families on TV, we mainly see families or commercials, we mainly see families happy and, perfect like, but that's not the case. I think we all know that's not the case. And Francoise Marie wrote, made it evident to others that that's not the case of family. She defined family as people who basically didn't like each other that were forced to live under one household, and I know we all can relate. Um, and then you'll see a transition of how families were seen as in commercials and how we're seeing families on TV today. And nuclear families consists of you have a father, a mother, and maybe 2 or 3 children as perfect children. An example of this can be Obama and his family. Then today's families on TVs, you see more families like Everybody Hates Chris, and you have a mother and a father, but you have 2 or 3 sassy children. Moving on, family conflict division. Blended families can be a conflict, and fights among siblings can be a conflict. So we know that in Cinderella, she's mistreated by her stepmother, and an example of fighting siblings can be stepbrothers. Family and religion. How does family and religion help bring families back together, and how does family and religion help avoid conflict? So family and religion can bring families back together, whether it be through going to church services on whichever day is scheduled for you based on your religion, whether it be Sundays or Saturdays, or basically just coming together and praying at a dinner table before having dinner. How can it avoid conflicts? I think religion is still a fear. I think a strong belief in God, you'll have a fear. And an example is this is that, me, I have a strong belief in God, and I feel like if I was to ever disrespect my parents, that's always in my conscience. If I'm ever mad at my mom or dad and I want to say something snobby, I just think like, nah, I can't do that. The number one rule is honor thy mother and father. And what happens when a family member step out of their religion and family beliefs? So a play by Frederick, The Blood Wedding, it gives an example of this. It's basically a mother who basically chooses who her daughter will marry. And when her daughter is not in love with the person she chooses, she eventually runs off and marry who she wants to marry. Confucius and family is really big on Chinese culture. And the number one rule is honor your parents. And I think that's the number one rule worldwide. But another rule in this, which I found really strange, is that children eat whatever food is left over after all the elders are ate. And growing up, my mom or my family always said the children eat first and then the adults. So I can see a difference here. Friendship and love. So basically here I'll define friendship, kinfolk, and best friends, and then we'll play a little game afterwards. So friendship is basically, friendship is a bond between individuals sharing common interests and values. Best friends basically just display a bond that seems unbreakable. And kinfolk is saying that you can have family members that's friends, and your friends can be your family members. So we'll play a game using the movie Word Bank. Huckleberry Finn, which category would that fall under? It would be best friends. Girls Trip, which category would that fall under? It would be friendship. And kinfolk will use Sister Trap. They are sisters, they are related, but they are close friends. 13.4, what do we mean and what is meant historically by the term romantic love? So romantic love is a relationship that may or may not include sex. The feelings and the desire to be with that person is for the sake of that person, not satisfaction or personal desires. So here I created a little history path of romantic love. Keeping it short and sweet. So the period of Marialty is basically where people idolize Virgin Mary. And this idolization of Virgin Mary, tended to elevate the status of upper class women and, holy orders. Then as time went on, you progress to the knight in shining armor era. And this is basically where, this is basically an area of romance where you have a knight who would do anything for his love or his lady. Essentially he'll die for his lady. Chivalry is some things like opening a door for her or walking on the side of the curb of the street so that water or mud won't splash on them. And, a fun fact about chivalry, cheval comes from a France meaning of horse. And that's why you see a lot of these knight in shining armors riding on a horse. Courtly love. This is a picture of Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. And she basically formed this idea of entertainment that spread across a lot of royal courts. And this entertainment was courtly love. And basically in this area, you'll have men doing everything to show why they belong with a woman or why this woman should marry them. The transition of courtly love did transition over time. In the beginning, you have women that were really snobbish and highbred, and they felt like men were born to just adore them and be their slaves. As time progressed and we got into the Renaissance period, the woman became less cruel, well educated, more charming and sophisticated, and it just required their man to be an equal of them. So they didn't look down on their man. They required their suitor or man to be a match of them or somewhere close to that. And then we progress into the time of romance, game, and love. And this is a period where, seduction was really heavy. And The Way of the World is a play that, really highlights seduction. 13.5, what is the concept of love and marriage? How does the concept of love and marriage evolve? So, this is basically we have the Victorian model and marriage today. And we're basically going to compare the two. And the Victorian area is basically an area of upper and middle class that decided to forget, their humble past and start living correctly. And the idea of living correctly was this Victorian model that consists of gender roles and double standards and conspicuous consumptions. And I think we're familiar with gender roles. And this was basically that the man is supposed to work and the wife is supposed to stay home. And then we lead into double standards, which is that in this time they believe that the men can have sex before marriage, but the women couldn't. And conspicuous consumptions is just where the women try to show off the wealth of their husbands. This is where women will wear really, really pricey attire and jewelry just to show off the wealth of their husband. And then as we go into marriage today, we see an increase in, single home families and families without marriages. And we see a decrease in basically not waiting for marriage in order to have sex and have children. A lot of people are just having sex without being married. And some law changes that changes marriages today is that now, all couples are able to be married, despite whether the sex of the couples. And this was a law that was recently passed. 13.6, how are the notions of love changed in the 20th and 21st century? So, the notions of love have changed in the 20th and 21st century through many ways, and I'll highlight the ways through feminism, gay love, old and in love, and basically a world without love. Feminism is basically where women are really independent and they're strong and they feel like, a man is just an accessory. I don't need a man to be happy. I don't need a man to meet this picture of a fulfillment life. Gay love basically brought a rise of attention to HIV/AIDS. And in The Normal Heart, this is a story. This is a story by Larry Kramer, and he introduces a gay couple. And basically, you have a gay couple, and you have one dying of AIDS. And the lover basically comes home from grocery shopping and finds his lover dying. Old and in love is basically just saying you're never too old for love. And in the Notebook, you see that Noah is like still in love with his wife, and although she has Alzheimer's, he constantly tells her stories to remind her of them love. A World Without Love introduced the term utopianism, which is the belief that the idea of society can be planned and rationally administered. People believe that you could be free of emotion, and marriage was just for reproduction only. And the novel, The Brave New World, really highlighted this. And that's my chapter.